Thank you so much.
Here we go. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Lorelli, and thanks everyone for joining. Welcome. We're excited. Corey and I are here, and we're excited to talk to you today about Terraform automation and how to adopt Terraform as well as scale it through your organization.
Agreed. Yeah, well, I'll mention before we get to intros too, that survey was designed. We put together some questions to just understand what maybe brought you to the webinar and how we might be able to follow up most effectively if you're looking to engage from a tool and engage deployment perspective, or from a services. Feel free to take it and let us know what brought you and what you're looking to do in the future. But ready when you are, Sean, if you want to kick off.
Great. Yeah, so let's dive right in. So first, a little bit of background about Corey and myself. So Corey, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Corey Bannerman, and I'm our field CTO. Within CDW, there's a group called Digital Velocity. So I'm the field CTO for that group, covering state and local, education, and federal. We'll talk a lot about what my group does, but personal history on me: live in Atlanta, 2 wonderful sons, wonderful wife, and 2 dogs. Been in the IT space now, and specifically as a customer-facing architect, and now field CTO for going on 12 years now. Prior to CDW, I worked for Amazon. Prior to that, it was HPE and SHI, another lifetime ago. Nice to meet everybody, and thanks for joining. Go ahead, Sean.
Great, thanks. And my name is Sean Doyle. I'm a partner solutions engineer here at HashiCorp Federal, focusing on the public sector, as well as our public sector partners such as CDW. And I've been working in IT a little over 20 years in all areas of the stack. So networking, application development, cloud, and automation, as we're going to be discussing here. So welcome everyone. We'll take real short intros here, and we're going to jump right in. First, we wanted to talk a little bit about Digital Velocity and HashiCorp's partnership together, and how we really complement each other, with our offerings.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'll start off here. This is a page that shows kind of the high level as far as our certifications and specializations within HashiCorp's portfolio. Understand my group does a lot of things, but I will say almost everything we do starts with Terraform. And it's just a great tool that, whether it's our AWS, Azure, GCP team, or our software developers, or our data team doing things like AI and machine learning, everybody in our organization uses Terraform. But we also do Hashi specific services. So we'll get into some of the details of these as we go in. But high level, just understand we hold expertise in infrastructure as code, doing cloud landing zones and the guardrails that come with that. We've done hundreds of these where a customer comes to us to build their cloud environment, gets the benefit of all those years and many engagements as far as the guardrails, security, the best practices, immutable infrastructure, which we're going to talk about today, being implemented through Terraform and infrastructure as code, but setting up that infrastructure as immutable from the beginning, and then maintaining, managing, and versioning it. Network infrastructure automation as well. So you have kind of the network side and then the overall cloud infrastructure automation. There's also people automation is another thing we do. So when we're talking about using AI to automate processes, people, we have a large range of that, but if it's automation, we probably do it. And then accelerated adoption programs for infrastructure as code and security. So I kind of already mentioned this, but when a customer comes to us for a landing zone, sometimes we just deploy it with our Terraform and give them the benefit of that speed. Other times we help them actually accelerate their adoption of infrastructure as code. So handing over a large code base for them to start with, teaching their teams how to actually implement an infrastructure as code philosophy and processes. Application modernization is one of our biggest areas of growth and delivery. So we're working with a lot of large customers on migrating, modernizing, and breaking into microservices, large monolithic or enterprise apps. We also have a specialization in custom apps. So we have tools that are designed to help us assess and create a plan for modernizing custom applications, whether you have 1 or 300. And then hybrid and multi-cloud design. So we're very cloud first and cloud native, but we understand that, you know, everybody started in the data center. I did it for a long time before I moved into this space. So we can help you wherever you are in your journey, whether you're all data center today, looking to move to hybrid or a cloud first initiative, or you're already cloud native and you know, spread out pretty decently. And then security automation and the workflows. So those are some of the key ones. Sean, I know there was
one thing I wanted to point out on this slide in particular is, so CDW, if you look on the bottom left of the slide, HashiCorp recently announced a competency program that we have for our partners, where we, you know, we qualify our partners to see if that they have expertise in various areas of our product field. And so CDW was one of the first to receive the HashiCorp infrastructure competency, which is related to, you know, infrastructure automation, as Corey mentioned. So with that in mind, Corey, do you want to explain a little bit more about all of your various offerings?
I do, and I know this is an eye chart for everybody joining, so bear with me. I'm going to keep this really simple because we're here to talk about CDW and Digital Velocity and HashiCorp, not everything else we do, but just understand we are a very specialized services group where CDW has made the investment over the last 8 or 10 years to go out and change from, you know, particularly software and hardware fulfillment, traditional VAR, to more of an SI, more of an integrator. And how they did that was through a number of acquisitions. So what we've done is we've concatenated those companies and teams is we've created these 6 pillars for the group Digital Velocity. Now, to be clear, there are other services groups under the umbrella within CDW who do other things. This isn't everything CDW does. This is just what Digital Velocity does. The first pillar here, cloud and cloud native. Anything and everything you can think of in the big 3 public clouds, as well as some other lesser known ones. So everything from helping you build a cloud center of excellence to what we already talked about with, you know, using infrastructure as code, teaching you how to do it, how to deploy, migrating to the cloud, and automating it. The data side, everything from data warehouse and data lakes to databases, visualization, AI, HPC, and contact center AI. This is an area that is exploding and growing. We're all hearing about AI. Most of us have used ChatGPT or Bard. There isn't much we can't help with, and it's not just those internet-based kind of public AIs. We can help train models on-prem for a customer and build out a workflow. Intelligent platforms, these folks cover some amazing things. So we covered it here in kind of some simple terms: ServiceNow, Salesforce, e-commerce, content management, a lot of marketing. So we actually have a group within our company that used to be called the agency. They actually operated in that space of marketing and e-commerce and user experience. But this is a really interesting area for customers looking to improve the user experience, e-commerce, search engine optimization, and marketing. Strategic consulting, this one's really powerful. We have a lot of customers who are able to actually go out and deliver a project, but a lot of customers come to us looking for large scale strategy engagement, right? How do we actually build the project around an initiative that includes many different technical projects and delivery? So everything from assessing and health checking what you have to helping you build a plan to move to infrastructure as code or automate across all of the different pillars of your organization. Any big organizational change, that's where this group kind of falls in. Software engineering, so this is everything from custom app development, right? Web apps, desktop, enterprise, mobile, as well as taking existing custom apps and modernizing them, containers, microservices, as well as looking at off-the-shelf applications and doing API integration with other services, you know, all of that good stuff. We also have services to teach customers about DevOps and agile methodology and help them upskill into that more of a CI/CD software first engineering kind of mindset from the traditional data center mindset. So lots of great stuff there. And then the last thing being digital talent and orchestration. So this covers everything from staffing, you know, hiring a person that's on CDW paper as a contract for a period of a specific skill, all the way to one of our recent acquisitions, Locust Recruiting. So finding the right person with the right skills for the right price. And something we've been kind of working towards is Elastic Bench, right? So the ability for a customer to get into an engagement with us and pull the resource they need for a certain period of time much more swiftly than you traditionally could through staffing or professional services. We also do offer managed services as well. So CDW has a larger practice. We have a cloud focused practice. They are now married and growing. So anything managed service you can imagine. Thanks for that time, Sean. I know that was a lot to go through, and anybody who has more questions, we can kind of follow up outside of this to discuss particular pillars.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note here, just as a note, we're here today to talk about Terraform and adopting and scaling Terraform within your organization. You notice on the last slide, CDW has experience with more than just Terraform. And so our products, Corey, are used across all of these different pillars of your delivery mechanisms, right? So it's not, yes. CDW has expertise in more than just Terraform, and maybe at a future, we'd be happy to host another webinar going into some of the other products. We'll touch upon some of them today, but keep this focused to Terraform. So absolutely, you can see some of that here as well, Corey, if you want to go into this. Right. Yeah,
let me throw something out too. You mentioned the other tools that we have, right? So Vault, Consul, Boundary. HashiCorp has a large portfolio of awesome software and offerings. And to Sean's point, we have experience across multiple. We call out some in here. So we try to keep this primarily to Terraform and Vault focused and, success stories. But these are a couple. I don't want to read to you what's on there, but the short version is, for example, with the bank, we allowed them very quickly to adopt this infrastructure as code, and Vault being PKI and secrets management and dynamic credentials. We helped them very quickly adopt those practices and those tools, and allowed them to, migrate 29 different environments with up to 800 VMs in a single year, right? So I can tell you from experience, a lot of customers doing it themselves, they'll get there, but what's the learning curve? How long is it going to take? What's the skilling plan? We meet the customers where we are and wherever they are in their skill, and then we can operate in different ways. So in some cases, we go with an enablement first workshop approach, teach the customer how to fish, then they go off and fish, right? If you have a team who's very skilled and capable of upskilling and taking it on, we're happy to support that. Then we have kind of the more white glove approach where we come in and do everything, and maybe the team's just kind of keeping up for documentation and handoff, and then we support you long term. And then finally, the preferred method, I think, for everybody, working together hand in hand. So we have success stories across multiple different markets and geos, but these were three that we called out. There's links on each of these, so I don't want to go too deep into the minutia, because we have great little success story breakdowns of these that explain what it was, what the need was, and what the conclusion was. But the high level takeaways are here for anybody who's wondering, how much previous experience do you have? We have a lot of it in this space. So we, like I said, our team's using it internally, and we've been doing it for customers for a long while. So thanks, Sean.
Great, thanks, Corey. And so let's talk just a little bit of brief background about HashiCorp. So we are the cloud infrastructure automation company, and we write our products to provision, secure, connect, and run any architecture for any application, right? So we're here for Terraform, but we have products portfolio that spans much more than Terraform, right? We have products that focus on infrastructure, on networking, on security, on applications. You can see here we're in 8 out of the 10 Fortune 10 customers, and in more than 180 of the Fortune 500 customers. Depending on the product, we have multi-million downloads annually. And so again, as we're learning about Terraform today, keep in mind, and if you're interested, we have many other products that can help your organization adopt cloud in a secure, automated, and efficient way.
To add to that too, Sean, for any of the folks that are sitting there thinking, wow, they have, huge company, huge impact, must be expensive. It's one of the best things about Hashi is they have that open source first mindset. So they have the open source options for you to start with. As you grow and scale and start to, it becomes more integral to your business operations. They then have enterprise versions that you can run on-prem, and then they're also offering cloud-based managed and supported solutions. So There's something for everybody, whether you're a massive enterprise looking to adopt this across many teams, or you're a startup who is moving agilely and needs to use open source anywhere you can, and then move to, licensed and supported as the need arises. So just wanted to point that out there.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Corey. And again, we're here together with our partners such as CDW to talk to you about from adoption to scale, right? How do you accelerate your journey and improve your time to value for your clients, right? And it's a combination of people, process, and technology. And so, HashiCorp, we hope to provide the technology, right? And CDW can provide the skilled practitioners to help you reach that goal efficiently, quickly, and for your organization. So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit more about what CDW has to offer from a services perspective, how you can engage them, things of that nature. And then we're going to get into Terraform, how to adopt it and how to scale it in this section. And please, as always, if you have any questions, please drop it in the chat, and we will, we'll either answer that in line, or we'll try to get to that at the end.
Yeah, and by the way, Whitney, I see your generative AI question. I can talk about that a little bit when we get to the end, should we have time, but we can also reach out as a follow-up to talk about that. But go ahead, Sean. Sorry, this one's mine. So let's talk a little bit about what we have here. So I included this slide because I wanted to let you all know, like, this isn't our first rodeo in this space, right? We've been doing this a long time. So what we've done is we've been able to, across many different verticals, services, products, and practices, we take a consistent approach to all of that, as well as all of the clouds. And the way we do that is through tools like Terraform, right? Being able to come in and write your code for your first cloud or for your data center and automate that, it makes it much easier to then go and create that multi-cloud or that hybrid cloud approach. But from an actual services standpoint, if you look at the pyramid here, you have the different layers, right? You have the data at the top, at the bottom there, typically, the top of the pyramid, and insights, data ops, and big data are on everybody's mind, right? Data is king. How do we get value out of it? And we need an approach to that aligns with all of our other approaches. Applications, modernization, and development, especially for the folks on this call in the public sector, this is like top of mind for all of my public sector customers. How do I modernize all of these applications? Maybe, I was talking to a large federal agency yesterday, and they have everything built out in Dynamics, and it's kind of just all bolted on, and they are terrified on how they're going to modernize that. But more importantly, modernize it now, 5 years down the road, we don't want to be in the same position where we're trying to figure out how to modernize it again. So taking that approach of looking at the whole long-term, containers, automated infrastructure, landing zones, and managed services, all that fits in. And how we do that is through an approach we break out into a couple stages. So assess, right? Coming in and doing things like technical readiness assessment or cloud adoption plans. So what do you have? How is it set up? What are the dependencies? And what are the stakeholders? And where do you need to approach? And what fits in the cloud? What needs to stay in the data center? All of it needs to be automated and done through code. And then the business consulting. We talked a little bit about our ability to do that strategic consulting angle. So you need to have that alignment with people and process, because guess what? This is no longer where you can have your network team and your storage team, and here's the apps team, and everybody's siloed. If you want to make these massive initiatives and changes work, you really have to bring those people together. And that's where business consulting and aligning your process and strategic initiatives is so important. Then we move to the adoption stage, right? So whether that's starting from scratch and building a landing zone through automated infrastructure and upscaling on IAC and Terraform, or it's health check and remediation. Hey, we've already kind of built out, an Azure and an AWS environment, but we're not really comfortable with where it is. We do engagements like that all the time, where we come in and health check what you have, make recommendations, fix the gaps, and then start from there like you just built it from scratch. Next is migrating and training. How do we get your team ready to take ownership? The last thing we want is you to spend money on services and product and consumption, and then your team turns around and goes, I don't know how to manage any of this, right? It felt like it was all handed to us, and now we're expected to be experts. So having that plan for a skill gap is important. Next, you move into the accelerate phase, right? So now you've got your landing zones, you've got your your processes lined out, you got your people skilled up. How do you take advantage of premium services to align to those business outcomes, whether that be managed services to cut down on staff time so they can innovate, whether that be strategic partner services for edge use cases. And I'm not talking about hashing necessarily. I'm talking about, do I use an Azure firewall or do I use a virtual firewall appliance from one of the security vendors, right? All of those strategic things, as well as just getting to that true cloud and cloud native stage where you're able to innovate constantly and maintain that new approach and perception that you've created and process. Finally, the management of it. Once you build it all, you got to manage it. And it's much different than managing an on-prem data center was 10 years ago, right? So everything from basic and first call support with some of our groups, Amplified IT and our managed services group, all the way to full-blown managed service where you can call us up and we can do projects with you and make changes on the fly. So next. This is kind of a re-image of that same process, but at the bottom here, you'll notice, I wanted to point this out. This is how we go about customers who come into us greenfield. Typically, we start with what we call a technical readiness assessment. These range, but typically we start at about $5,000 for that. And that's where we go out and collect all the data, work with your stakeholders, and build a plan to do the rest of this. As you can see, all of the rest of this is under IAC and Terraform. So we use Terraform to enable this, and we do what we call a cloud foundation or landing zone. So we have different levels for different customers. Basic is an opinionated, meaning you get all the benefits of our knowledge and our opinion on how this should be done to do it correctly. And we deploy it automated. So you're not spending money on us sitting around doing click ops, deploying this environment, right? It can happen very quickly and is very affordable for the basics. Then we move up into essentials. That's where you need things like, we're going to do direct connect or express route. We need VPNs. Maybe we're going to do backup to another site. Maybe we're doing a hybrid model where this cloud environment is going to be production or DR. And it's kind of, it's more than a basic, but it's not quite premium. Premium is where you're a large enterprise or you need, active data centers. And we're going to be doing pretty significant work at that point, multiple direct connects, integrating to other clouds. And that's where you get into the premium. But all of these come with the experience that we have and the benefits of infrastructure as code. Next, we move into the migrate, modernize, and get you cloud native. And then we can move into data modernization. Are you doing, a data lake out of all that data you move to the cloud and put into microservices? Are you getting analytics and visualization? Are you using AI against that data to get insights or make decisions and, get higher accuracy and lower human capital investment to actually get those insights, which is what everyone's trying to do. And then managed services and, ongoing professional services, staffing, placing people and, operations in place to manage and maintain what we've built here. So just one little thing on there. So we have typically less than 45 days once we start to kind of get to that MVP status of what we're looking for and get to that point where you're starting to become cloud native. So we really do cut that learning curve back. I've seen other customers who we do like an initial engagement with, just do a little workshop. They start to build themselves. Typically it takes somewhere between 6 months or a year before they come back like, okay, we feel like we got a good handle on Azure, AWS, and we're ready to talk about, cloud acceleration and modernization. So the goal is to get you through all that very quickly and do it right. And you get all the benefits of our experience and past deployments and get you to that point, because that's where the value really comes in, where you're acting cloud native and you're getting those benefits early. Next.
Absolutely. And so let's just set up the framing, if we can, before we jump into adopting Terraform, scaling Terraform. So, with cloud, with the introduction of cloud, we've really shifted the paradigm. Previously, before we would have data centers, physical data centers, when we had to get new servers or applications provisioned, that would usually involve a ticketing system with multiple different teams, right? And those teams would have to allocate funding, they'd have to procure equipment, they'd have to rack and stack the equipment. And this was typically an involved process between multiple different teams. And now as we shift towards the public cloud or even private cloud, right, we're really moving towards this system of record and system of engagement model where, now containers can come and go, right? You probably heard the term, treat your applications like cattle, not like pets, meaning, we've moved to much more dynamic provisioning system, right? With public cloud, it's very easy to get a fully connected network with public access, private access, things like that, as long as you're authorized to do so. So we've really thought about this at HashiCorp, and we've come up with a layered approach, right? And so we call this our cloud operating model. So we're moving from dedicated servers to infrastructure as code. That's something we're going to be talking about today. Our security products are based on identity, right? We're moving from this IP-based model of trust, where maybe I trust this IP address or this range of IP addresses because it's in some DMZ zone, or because it's behind a DMZ, right? And I have that DMZ zone to protect inbound and outbound of my network. Well, now the perimeter of my network, when I move to the cloud, is much more open. So we're really, and IPs, again, as systems spin up and spin down, those IPs change so dramatically. It's really difficult to keep that in check. So we want to reframe this to be a more identity-based mechanism. And then on the networking side, again, as things spin up and down, it's hard to track those things reliably. So that's where our networking products come into play. But we don't want to dive too far into there. Today, we're talking about infrastructure as code. And how do we adopt this cloud operating model? How do we typically see customers doing this, right? And as Corey alluded, right, there's different stages of their services capabilities. And that's because, in stage one, you have maybe application teams checking out different tools. Maybe they're checking out Kubernetes. Maybe they're checking out Terraform or our Vault product. Maybe they're exploring with AWS, right? So they're using these cloud services, and they're using these different things, to test out delivery mechanisms. How do I get my application securely to production faster? And maybe they start finding tools that work for them, right? They start finding things. But when they start trying to expand outside of their own team on the usage of these tools, well, now they're, encountering, they're counting some other team is using another tool, right? Or this team has already made inroads with something else, so they're a little hesitant to adopt it. And this is where we really move to stage two and standardizing. We see our customers standardizing on operations, security, and networking, right? And really kind of trying to formulate a cloud operations unit, as well as you may have heard this term, a cloud business office or a cloud center of excellence, where stakeholders from various teams come together and say, this is what we're going to support. This is how we're going to provision things using these tools and platforms. And, if we have new ideas or new methodologies, we need to bring them up and get these approved before our customers, our internal customers, not our external facing customers, but our internal customers can consume them and use them to get their app to production faster. And then lastly, sort of that last stage is this notion of private estate. And this is sort of the dynamic data center, moving in a hybrid approach. So I can have that same experience, whether I'm in the public cloud, whether I'm in the private cloud, whether I'm at the edge, right? It's the same experience, the same consumption, the same pattern of deployment, no matter where I am, right? And so HashiCorp has built these tools to help us move customers to this third stage, right? And so a lot of times what we see is when teams start adopting cloud, and I've seen this myself. I was previously a consultant at a consulting company such as CDW. In fact, I actually worked at CDW for a little while. But when I'm engaging with my customers who are adopting the cloud, typically they'll have a cloud ops team. So this picture, we just have a single user, but it's multiple users, right? And it could be in multiple different departments. So maybe you have your web app teams, you have your cloud ops teams, you got your networking teams, you have your security teams, IT security and risk, and they're all trying to learn how to use the cloud, right? They're all trying to learn what are the services they have, how do I securely deploy things, how do I govern access, how do I govern my applications when they're up there, how do I deploy them, right? Every cloud, every platform has a different method of deployment. And then lastly, how do I make sure I'm auditing these things successfully, right? And then along the journey, a lot of times organizations will say, okay, well, let's just use this example, right? We started in AWS, but now we want to leverage maybe our agreements with Microsoft or something else, or we want to use a certain service that Microsoft has that AWS, that we like more than AWS, or we want to use more than AWS, what have you. It doesn't matter, right? We want to use some other service in another platform. Well, now we have to do this whole process over again, right? For all those different teams. And maybe we come up with a standardization for this, but still, it's a lot to learn. It's a lot to govern. It's a lot to secure. And it's a lot to learn deployment patterns. And this just keeps expounding no matter what platform you move to, right? You could add Kubernetes to this mix. So this isn't really an optimized way to adopt these dynamic systems, right? So now with Terraform, we can unify at least pieces of this, right? We still have to learn how to use the APIs in AWS, GCP, and other platforms. We still have to understand the APIs, but we can unify this process because Terraform is a single control plane that utilizes a standard language to describe and deploy these resources for us. Because and you're going to see in a moment, and we'll go more into details about this, but now our workflow is the same, no matter what platform it is, right? It could be any of these cloud providers. It could be Kubernetes. It could be Nomad, one of our products, Nomad. It could be, as the world moves more and more to software-defined dynamic infrastructure, we can provide providers, there's likely a provider that exists for that infrastructure. And so this is what we really want to move to, right? As consumers of these dynamic systems. And so that's what Terraform allows. It allows us this consistent workflow, and it's extensible to any cloud provider and service. And it's the same workflow for your cloud teams, for your app teams, for your security teams. And we achieve this through something known as our provider ecosystem. So right now we have over 3,000 different providers. You can see here, right, we have providers for the major cloud providers in this picture. But if you notice right at the very bottom, we have providers for Active Directory, AWS Cloud Control. We have providers for DNS, for Palo Alto, for F5s. We have providers for Kubernetes, for Helm. We have providers. We have many, many providers. If there's an API behind it, it's either a HashiCorp created provider, a partner created provider, or a community created provider. We also offer an SDK, so you can write your own custom provider. It's written in Golang, which is a programming language developed by Google. And with that SDK, if there's a provider that doesn't exist for your own functionality, or you need a unique functionality type, you can write your provider. You can write a provider, that can handle your needs. And so what we see moving to this infrastructure as code pattern, what are the benefits of this, right? Well, now we can use version control to automate and reduce human error and failed builds of infrastructure. That's very important, right? So with infrastructure as code, specifically Terraform's paradigm, right? It's a declarative infrastructure as code models, what does that mean? That means when I write, my Terraform code, I am declaring what I want to be there. And what Terraform does is it reconciles that with what's actually there and what you want, right? And so the Terraform workflow is to write the code, right? As we see here, our practitioner writes the code. Maybe we're using some modules from our public registry, as well as the providers. We haven't talked about modules yet, but what modules are just reusable pieces of Terraform code. And then they run a plan against that. So the plan looks at the Terraform code, the infrastructure as code. It goes out to the cloud providers and says, or whatever infrastructure platform we're coding against, and says, okay, here's what this practitioner would like, what is actually there, and what is the difference. And if there's, if there's a difference, it'll say, here's the things that are different that don't match what you want. I'm going to go make these changes. I'm going to go create these things, or I'm going to go remove these things. Now, I say remove. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds there, but just know that in order for it to remove it, it would have to already be managed by Terraform. And we'll talk a little bit about an exciting announcement that we just had yesterday as we move through these slide decks that can help you that can help there in a little bit. But regardless, I write what I want. Terraform checks what I have. And if not, and then when I'm ready, I can apply this, and it will reconcile everything so that the state of my cloud is the state of my declarative code.
I wanted to add something really quickly there. So just for anybody who's on here and who's thinking, my infrastructure folks are going to be managing this, and they don't want to code, they're not developers. One thing you really need to know about Terraform is, one, it's the future, so they need to kind of look at this and get over it anyways. But this isn't going in and becoming a master programmer. Like, this is a tool that I have seen folks who have never written a piece of code in their life figure out in a very short period of time. And be able to operate in and manage because of that declarative model. The other side of it, because those providers and modules and plans are actually available out in things like GitHub and GitLab, where you can go and benefit from the work other people have done. Now, disclaimer, test everything. Don't use anything in production that you're not absolutely sure is working the way you want to. It allows people who aren't necessarily top software developers to use code in their everyday, which, I've heard customers actually say, I don't have time for automation. You don't have time not to automate in this world, because you're only a couple click ops, we call it, away from major issues in some of these cloud vendors. And by doing this, you create that immutable infrastructure and can protect yourself from it. But you also create a culture of collaboration for the whole infrastructure. It's not siloed into network and storage and compute anymore. Everything is right there in the code. If you need to know how you're supposed to be deploying VMs or what the network's supposed to look like, it's not like you have to go, do a request and set a meeting necessarily. It's all there. Not to say that anybody can change any part that you don't want. You can't control that at the same time, but just be aware of that. This is like, if you're thinking the coding part is going to be a hurdle, it really shouldn't be, but that's also what groups like mine are there for, to help you bridge that gap. Sorry, I know that was a little...
That's a great point, Corey. So as Corey mentioned, we use a language that we've developed called HashiCorp configuration language, and it's not, it's a declarative approach. So it's basically, you say, I want this resource, here's the parameters I want for that resource, or I want information from this resource, and here's the things I want to filter for. And you can get more complicated than that, but essentially that's it. It's not, object-oriented programming or anything like that. And the benefit, again, as Corey mentioned, is, cost control is definitely a benefit here, right? So when I'm writing things that I want to repeat, I write it as infrastructure as code first. I apply it. When I'm done testing, when I'm done iterating, when I'm done developing that, I can just destroy it. I don't have to spend any cost when that thing's not running, because I know I can just spin it up again whenever I want, because I declared it already, right? So very beneficial there as well. We talked a little bit about this, but I will highlight some additional benefits of infrastructure as code. Is now we can use our source repositories, right? We can commit these things to Git. Be careful you don't commit secrets. I'll just say that. But we can commit these things to Git. We can version them. We can collaborate on them. We can make branches. We can promote branches. We can have, a main branch that's always the standard. And then we have our forked, we have forks, and we have our release branches, or anything else, our feature branches, our testing branches, etc. And we can really move quickly on here and iterate quickly for our consumers.
Basically,
of course, because we're connected to Git, we connect.
All of those, really quickly, basically what we're saying is all of those wonderful things that come out of the development world are now applying to infrastructure. So a lot of those terms, if you're a pure infrastructure person, may sound new or alien. Once you learn what they are, you're going to go, well, this makes total sense. I can't believe you kind of use this workflow prior to in how we manage our infrastructure. So it's all about having a process and a guardrails for how you implement change and collaboration and promotion of resources and changing of resources. Sorry, Sean, just wanted to add.
No, that's a great addition, and you actually reminded me of something else I wanted to point out here. So when we commit these things to our repos of choice, or our Git hosters of choice, there's various tools available to us, right? Some partner tools, some open source tools that can increase your security posture as well, right? So whenever you commit to, say, another branch and you do a PR to your main branch or your release branch or what have you, you can scan that infrastructure as code because it's right there, it's written down, right? That's one of the benefits of writing down what you want. So there's scanners available out there that will scan that code and inform you of any potential security violations, right? Or security risks, right? With how you've designed your infrastructure. A very simple one is if you create security groups with, quad zero access, right? Anyone can access this resource. Well, that could get flagged, right? This is a potential vulnerability that you don't want to commit to your main release branch. So there's tools out there that can do this, and your security teams will love this because now they can have these tools that can scan your code prior to release so that you can prevent, you probably heard the industry term shift security left. They can get these scans in prior in a proactive way instead of a reactive way when the thing's already deployed because somebody went and deployed it. And no one knows that they left the security group wide open, right? So we moved our code to a version control system. That's great with our enterprise products. And I want to go back a couple slides here. So this is sort of the view of like how that stage one, right? That adoption stage where we're looking at our open source products. And it's very powerful in and of itself. But as we move to scaling, right, we want to start looking at, okay, now I'm committing this to Git. Now I have multiple people looking at this. Now I'm scaling this. Well, I want to move to more of a GitOps workflow. Now I have multiple people working in all these different workspaces, and our enterprise versions allow this to happen, right? We allow sort of this deployment pattern to happen where now I'm committing my things to Git, and with Terraform Cloud and Enterprise, I can track a certain branch, and when I PR into that branch, that can actually trigger application of the code automatically for me without any operator's intervention, right? So if I have that security scanning in place and other checks in place to check all of the things, because again, it's documented, it's code, then Terraform Cloud will take care of the rest. It'll detect a change has happened on the branch it's watching, and it'll run through a plan and apply. And we can have that, need approval and things of that nature too. Or we can be, we talk about continuous delivery and continuous deployment, right? So we can do both different models, right? Continuous delivery, where we deliver the app to prod, but it has a gate and somebody needs to press the button to actually release it. Or continuous deployment, where we know we have the checks in place in our pipeline, and it just, as soon as we just move it straight in, right? Completely automated. So one thing I want to point out here is that we take security very seriously. Actually, so last year at reInvent, HashiCorp was rated AWS's #1 security partner of the year for our Vault product. And we're always looking, we take it very seriously. We take security in all our products very seriously. And we're always looking at improving aspects of our products, not just from a security perspective, but from an operator perspective as well. So we released this feature, which again, we're talking about scaling Terraform, right? So previously, and let me just set up the problem statement here about why this is important. So previously, in order to interact with our infrastructure, we needed to authenticate and authorize to it, right? Makes sense. And so the way we would do that before is we would have these workspace variables in Terraform Cloud and Enterprise that would have our credentials in them, right? And we secure all of this. It's encrypted on disk. We have RBAC, role-based access control, inside of our enterprise products. So you can limit who has access to these workspaces, and thus you can limit access to this. But still, it's sort of, we could do better, right? We could do more. So what we did recently is actually we have this native just-in-time provider auth, where now every time Terraform goes and tries to interact with that infrastructure that needs authorization and authentication to it, it will just dynamically generate those credentials to do what it needs to do, and then the credentials go away. So now you don't have to worry about having these credentials in the workspaces, and we can do this, which makes it a lot easier when we have multiple workspaces and we start scaling that out. And so short form is, if you take anything from this, is we are constantly adding new features. An exciting one that just happened yesterday at our HashiDays conference is this config-driven import. So you may be thinking like, this is great, you know, infrastructure as code sounds amazing, sounds like what we want to do. I already have some stuff deployed. So how does that work, right? Like, it makes sense if I'm starting from scratch, but what if I already have things in AWS or things in Azure? So previously you could import those, but we had to do it one resource at a time, and you had to write the config yourself. Now we're doing config-driven import. This is a new feature in Terraform 1.15 where we can say, here's this ID of this resource on any, you know, on some infrastructure platform, and I want to import it to a resource, in this case called AWS_instance.app. So previously I would have to actually declare that AWS instance.app. And now we can actually we can generate code for this, where Terraform will go out and query that specific resource and pull in the parameters of it to generate the code for us. And then that way we can review it. So you can see down in that bottom picture where it says, hey, here's this resource that we created. Here's some parameters we found for that resource. Please review this. And if it's good, you know, commit it in and apply it to your configuration. And this works for multiple different resources now. So this was just released yesterday as GA. If you're interested in all of the releases, please check out the HashiCorp blog. And because we also have releases for some of our other products as well. And there's more Terraform releases as well. It's just, I wanted to highlight this one because we're talking specifically about how do I adopt this and how do I scale this out to different teams in my organization. So we've talked about adopting, right? We've talked about the process for Terraform. Great for a team. What happens when we have the whole organization playing in this sandbox, right? It's a little bit more tricky. Now we have things that we have to worry about. We have to worry about governance. We have to worry about, you know, compliance, security. We have to worry about cost controls. We have to worry about all these things. And this is where our cloud and enterprise products come into play. So, you know, on this slide, we have a number of things going on here. I want to draw your attention to the private module registry, right? So we have our public module registry. And again, the Terraform module is just reusable Terraform code. And there's a lot of public modules available for us to do various things you want to do, but maybe you have specific Terraform modules you want just for your organization. You can host those in your own private module registry such that other people can adopt and use those when they need to. And it follows version control, so you can have different versions, you can have different tagged releases. And this really starts setting up that self-service model, right? Where my developer comes in and I want to pick a networking module, and I want to pick a storage module, and I want to also use this Vault module, right? And it's all there for me. I just have to fill in the variables, right? It's been approved by operations, so I know this code is good. It's been tested and it's been proven to work, right? Now, when we plan and apply, we also have something known as policy as code. So just like we have infrastructure as code, we can define policy as code. And with our enterprise and cloud products, we have a feature called Sentinel, or a language called Sentinel. And just to give you a simple example, right? I can write code. Again, it's not like an object-oriented programming language. It's a declarative security model language to say things such as, you know, don't launch this if it's going to cost over $500 a month or $1,000 a month, or don't use any modules from the public registry, only launch things with modules from my private registry. So security and compliance can write these policies as codes and apply these in the plan and apply pipeline to either notify them, stop them with approval, or completely stop them, right? Like you just can't do this. What this allows you to do, right, is now I have these private modules, I have these security policies in place. So you can eliminate some of your approval process because you know these things are already approved, right? You've basically created a standard approval process for your developers. Again, quicker time to value, right? And lastly, down at the bottom, and we'll talk a little bit about this. I know we're running a little short here on time, so I'll go through this quickly, is we can also work with, your business users. Maybe you have already investments in like an ITSM, things like that. Those can plug in as well. So let's quickly talk through this workflow, because there are a few more slides I want to get to for Terraform Enterprise, and how does this all come together, right? When we're talking about scaling this out to multiple teams. So let's say we have a storage team and they write a storage module. They upload that module and now they're on version 1.5 in the private module registry. Awesome. So now I have a storage module that anybody, my developers can access if they need some kind of storage class or storage thing on the infrastructure. Next, my networking team comes and they create their own outputs for consumption by other workspaces, right? So maybe they have networking standards for development, networking standards for staging environments, and networking standards for production environments. This is very common, right? Where development, staging, and production in a cloud provider, their networking requirements are a bit different. Maybe you don't want development, maybe you're in a hybrid cloud scenario, you don't want development touching your private data centers, but production and staging have to, because they need to mirror each other. So we create these different standards. Now along comes an application team, and an application team says, well, okay, I need to use this, I have my own module. I want to consume production networking. I need my storage module, and I want to use a Vault cluster. Well, now they can self-service themselves with these published registries that have been approved, and they know they're going to get quality deployments and move forward there. Now let's say, okay, this all sounds great, but we have some things that we need to do that don't fit into a GitOps workflow, right? I can't just commit my code to some Git repo and expect Terraform to do something with it, because I need to do other things to the resources or the code or what have you before that happens. Terraform Enterprise and Clouds have a rich API system so that you can use an external pipeline and call the same APIs, right? And so we support both the GitOps workflow, a CLI-driven workflow, and this external workflow using APIs. And so you top that all off with adding in Sentinel policy enforcement, and this becomes, a true way to scale across your organization, across these various teams, and utilize really that, standardization and private estate model, where we're industrializing our cloud consumption or our dynamic infrastructure consumption. So wanted to bring this up too. Corey, do you have anything to add there?
No, that was all good, and I know we're running tight on time, and I'm always cognizant. I'd rather skip key things than rush. I think the key thing with ServiceNow is HashiCorp Terraform has direct integration capability. So we weren't going to go too deep into the nuts and bolts of it anyways, but just understand ServiceNow is being integrated all over ITSM and other solutions. If you need to, if you're integrating that already and doing that in your organization, you need to think about how this whole infrastructure as code and cloud center of excellence plan works into that ITSM plan, because this is kind of the future. Self-service, managed service management, and tying into all the other levels of automation through things like policy enforcement that we're showing here. So I think I wanted to go through in depth on our slides there, but the short version is you have the problem, ServiceNow integration, it can be the solution. And the result is, you want to go to that next slide there? Oh, sorry. The result being that you have the everything pushed through ServiceNow, integrated to Terraform, and we can make those changes with those predefined workflows. So I don't know if you want to speak to this one, but I think the key values, in my opinion, of Terraform and also a lot of Hashi's products, as well as our services, is that speed, time to market, focus on the developers, on value, right, and focusing on how can we do more with less quicker. Everybody has this problem in public sector. Reducing risk, right? So security exposure, but also that centralized policy enforcement. It gives your security team a lot of power while not taking away power from your infrastructure folks. And then for the cost side, increasing efficiency, managing that cloud spend, as well as setting those limits and alerts, making sure that everybody's aware of what's going on and things are done in a systematic way.
And again, as mentioned early on, we have many other products, and, as we move from adopting the scale, we see, this is typically how the process looks when we see adoption. It could change, it could vary a little bit, but we do have products that help you achieve that lower cost, lower time to value, lower risk, and fast, those 3 business values Corey just mentioned, right, across all of the stack. So as well as CDW, right, unlocks these superpowers for you and your teams as it starts scaling out across different organizations within or units within your organization, right? They can help you accelerate that quickly.
Indeed. Good. Yep. And just a high level review of what that process actually looks like. And you can take a lot of what you learned today about those processes and apply them to your own internal initiatives and get a lot of value, right? This is the way that things need to be done. You need to assess, you need to plan, then you deploy, then you can adopt and spread that adoption and the consumption and migrate at the same time into it. And then you get to that accelerate, cloud native, infrastructure as code native, centralized enforcement of everything. This is kind of the way of the future for sure.
So with that, thank you very much for your time and attention today. We really appreciate it. If you do have a chance to review or fill out that form, we would also greatly appreciate that. Always looking to improve here and learn more about what you're interested in. And yeah, next, start engaging with HashiCorp and CDW Digital Velocity. You can go and download our open source projects and try them out with you and your teams, and be happy to talk to you more about our enterprise features and our enterprise products as well.
Yep, we'll be sending out the deck and including a one-pager on an automation workshop that we offer too. So if you're looking to have us come out and have a conversation about how you can adopt some of this initial kind of upskilling and overviews, make decisions around it, there's that one-pager involved. I'm okay with staying around for a couple minutes in case anybody wanted to do some Q&A. I blocked an extra 30 minutes after this, but I know everybody's time is valuable. So appreciate everybody who came and listened, and hope you got some good value out of this and a new perspective on infrastructure as code, Terraform, and partners and services. So with that, do we want to open it up for questions? Sean, are we good?
Yeah, I'm okay.